Welcome back. This time we are going to talk about Europe's initiative to rearmament, which I salute. But I have brought more than once the opinion of Jack Watling from the Royal United Service Institute, RUSI, the most authoritative, in my opinion, on this issue. In his last article in The Guardian, Watling put emphasis in Europe's will to be serious at defense and about the need to defend Ukraine because both are needed. Actually, complacency about letting Ukraine fall and then get serious for real, it could lead to disastrous consequences because by then the damage would have been done. By then, Putin would have already become Xi Jinping's senior partner. And if you consider the mayhem produced by Trump's tariffs and his trade war, it would not be difficult for China to find an excuse to jump on Putin's wagon if the trade war went south for China. Likewise, I have brought you the opinion of Paul Krugman, who has pointed out that Europe has the resources to contain Putin and prevent that he taints the relations between China and the West. Yet Europe has, even though it has 10 times Russia's GDP, produces Russia produces 3 million artillery shells, just to mention one example, 3 million artillery shells per year, while Europe struggles to produce 1 million. And you remember the 2023 pledge to Ukraine for 1 million artillery shells, and that they ended up delivering only 300,000. Well, that's a bad record. And yes, Europe has committed 800 billion euros to defense and even issued a white paper with the framework for the framework of that plan. And even now, there seems to be a sense of urgency. There seem when that Europe seems to be lacking when they were subject to the failed leadership of Olaf Scholz. Yet there is still room for justified skepticism. On one hand, it's good that Europe has even made a counter proposal to Trump's ceasefire plan, while up to now the negotiation had been monopolized by Trump. Why does this bring an opportunity? Because this counter proposal not only gives Europe the opportunity to have a say on an issue that affects it directly, but it would give Europe the perfect excuse to, as soon as there is an impasse in this extremely biased peace plan, to restart negotiations under new leadership under Frederick Merz. And as I said, this affects Europe directly, but let's not forget that the most important, already mentioned issue is that Putin, if victorious in Ukraine, would take the relationship between China and the West, which is much more important because it implies not just Eastern Europe, but it implies also the global south, including Africa and the Middle East. And I am saying the West because I harbor the hope that in 2029, the United States could come back to a more rational course. But for that to be possible, it's necessary that that Europe pushes Trump aside, pushes the United States current government aside, so there could be a chance for a more unified West in the future. So it is dangerous that some in Europe are still longing, after seeing all they have seen, are still longing for Ukraine to cave to Trump's humiliating ceasefire. This would mean getting back to Czechoslovakia 1935, to surrender into the naive hope that you could bring Putin to sense, despite his economy being so invested in war. Chamberlain hoped that he could Hitler back to reason in 1938, only to only to give Hitler the opportunity to unleash a much bloodier and costlier war. That's why Europe must root for an impasse. Use the time to push for the upgrade of, and use that time, the time until that happens, to push for upgrade European defense to solve its numerous logistical problems and increase supplies to Ukraine to make possible training at the brigade level. This is very important, and it was I realized that after reading precisely Jack Watling. If you need to Ukraine to have enough resources to allow the rotation of soldiers that could integrate some of the most seasoned soldiers who are now stuck at the border, because otherwise, because there is no resources, if there is no men in the line, there is nothing to stop the Russians. So more resources, especially artillery and defense of the kind the Patriots used to provide, would give these more seasoned soldiers the chance to integrate into new brigades and avoid what happens to the 155 and 157 brigades that failed miserably in Pokrovsk. And Europe needs to fill that void after the impasse with MERS. The Germany's chancellor to be in 2025. We need MERS to lead negotiations in the shadows, because he's officially, and he's not officially, been the chancellor for a while. But we need that's an imperative, because otherwise we have seen that Macron alone cannot contain the USA naive bias of Starmer, and caving to Trump's plan now, only to expect that to regroup later will only vaporize whatever prestige has left, and possibly trap Europe in an energy dilemma where its options are either Russian gas via Nord Stream or Russian gas via the Transcaspian gas pipeline. So, is this possible? Yes, this is possible. It implies, it depends on one condition: the possibility of American oil finding a gap to get to invest in Russia's energy development. But that depends on lifting the sanctions. But if that happens, yeah, that is possible. That's why both Putin and Trump are so interested in lifting the sanctions. But then Europe will have no room to maneuver because by then they would have no alternative. Number two, we have the problem of procurement. Europe's record is bad, as in the case of 2023, in the case of the 1 million artillery shells pledged to Ukraine that I mentioned, and we have cases of self-deceit and complacency. And also there are many petty interests, local interests in play, since the European defense system includes many smaller companies that lobby their respective governments. What even has led to incompatibility among the many 155 millimeters artillery shells produced. So this chaos cannot stay, because that reminds me the case of Peru in the war against Chile, where the ammunition assigned didn't fit barrels of the rifles. That that's the level of ridiculousness this could reach. There are options though. Production could be specialized regionally. For instance, some areas could, where there are smaller companies, could specialize in artillery, in ammunition, and others where the bigger producers, where more technology and investment is required, could be specialized in other parts. Or we may have a consolidation of these smaller companies, where instead of the shareholders having shares in smaller inefficient companies, have shares in a much bigger company that is up to the task. This takes time though. This takes time unless, of course, you have a strong leadership. And that's precisely the reason I wanted to make this video, to highlight the need for that leadership, that which for now will not come from the United States. There is even a sad precedent of wasted funds that had been committed to increase productivity after the European Union was presented with a report about the state of productivity in the Union and how this was sustainable. This was unsustainable. So funds were allocated to increase research and development and to deal with dislocations resulting from the pandemic. And not surprised, much of those funds have been wasted in other unrelated priorities, and even in their priorities. That's the case of the Next Generation Fund. And so we have we have to avoid that something on those lines happens again. So that means that this new leadership, which I hope comes from MERS, must set very strict guidelines about the use of these funds. There is also the case of the states that are making excuses because they prefer to invest in welfare than in defense, which would be understandable in other circumstances. That would be my option in other circumstances. But when you have the same conditions that led to the Second World War recreating in the East, that's very irresponsible. Most notably, in those cases, among the bigger states in the European Union are the cases of Italy and Spain. Also, that's why also here strong leadership is needed, and Let's be honest, Keir Starmer's inclination for getting the United States in the short term has not been have not been precisely helpful. On the positive side, this could be a good opportunity for implementing the part of Zelensky's plan, the Zelensky's victory plan, which was championed by both Europe and the United States when it was presenting. But part of this plan include a chapter regarding defense production cooperation, and considering that Ukraine has a 1 million army strong with seasoned soldiers, this would relieve Europe when it comes to committing more soldiers than resources, uh, than it's what is politically acceptable. Uh, I'm not backpedaling on the need of counting with European peacekeepers, which are necessary to show that Europe has a commitment in Ukraine, and though 30,000 peacekeepers are not pale in comparison to the 1 million strong Ukrainian army, that would send Putin a message that your commitment is for real. But even though that industrial cooperation with Ukraine on defense would put more resources than soldiers on the table, which is more politically acceptable for Europe, and would use something circumstances have forced Ukrainian to have, that is a strong army of seasoned soldiers. The point here is to count with the right motivation and invoking the ghost of Czechoslovakia 1938 to suit voters. It's to sell them the idea that being seduced was for peace at being seduced by peace at any cost, as Europe was in 1938, could lead to much painful results in 1939. So what is the role the United States should play in this conflict then? Because it's naive to expect from Trump an initiative that strengthens Europe through Ukraine and isolates Putin, especially from Xi Jinping. It will all depend on Democrats to stop playing dead and coming now with a new Ukraine narrative that makes Europe takes them into account, and take into account the United States if Democrats get back to power in 2029, to to convey the idea that there is not either Europe or they themselves for the foreseeable future. Because if you don't do that, Democrats, Europe will fear that even if you come back to power in 2029, you will bring another Biden that will adopt the salami strategy and keep playing the stupid games Biden played in from the end of 2022 that made the 2023 counterinsurgency fail, and that will in the entire the voters, both in Europe and in the United States. That's why Democrats should open their mouth and must do it now, not in 2028. There is plenty of evidence that following Trump's lead, the only winner will be Putin, and the relations between the United States and China would suffer as a consequence. And precisely this should be the Democrats' new Ukraine narrative, not helping the small guy. That's idiocy. That's idiocy. Is how that will affect the United States, how a triumph by Putin will affect the United States. And Democrats have even an icon they can use, and that icon is FDR, who overcame the ridiculous expectations, the naive expectations created by appeasement in 1938, and supported England after educating a public opinion that was initially adverse to the idea, and overcame and created the rule systems that has kept the biggest countries in the world in reasonable peace for decades. So whatever role the USA will have will depend on the Democrats to grow up to the occasion. If that implies admitting Biden's incompetence, so be it, because the United States are more important than the feelings of Joe Biden and Jake Sullivan's. Playing dead will only make them irrelevant, will make Democrats irrelevant, but then it's up to them. And having said that, I leave you with our newscast.
Good evening. This is Brian Thomas Simons, and these are the main headlines of this hour. Among other news.
A. New 166 executive decisions were released in the Oval Office during the weekend. Among them, 1. The Fish and Wildlife Service, FWS, will immediately proceed to change its mission to extinguishing endangered species. As part of this process, DOGE will set the number of species this agency will eliminate every week and coordinate with the on the funding to make this goal possible. 2. DOGE will report to Secretary Little Marco weekly, if DOGE considers necessary, its progress on the restructuring of the State Department. As DOGE's senior advisor, Elon Musk already has his digital signature. There is no reason to distract Secretary Little Marco from his important mission in the Maldives, declared President Trump. Asked about the executive decision, Secretary Rubio requested once more an executive decision forbidding calling him Secretary Little Marco in official business. At the same time, he expressed his gratitude to President Trump for the new medals he will receive via UPS in the Maldives. 3. It will be forbidden for any court, including the Supreme Court, to disagree with any executive decision issued by the President to make America great again. As part of this decision, all judges will be part of Schedule F in order to facilitate their expedited removal in cases of non-compliance with this decision. Approached by reporters, Democratic Senate Minority Leader Schumer declared that, as a result of the "play dead" strategy, which replaced the "confusion strategy," though it's pretty much the same, he will lead Democrats into supporting this executive decision tacitly so at some time in the future, when they recover their voice, they can convince the American people that they were their best advocates all the time without them noticing the difference. B. New instances of meltdown at the Pentagon are uncovered as new signal scandal shakes the Defense Department. Among other signs of dysfunction in the Defense Department, new revelations show: 1. Misuse of the project to extract intelligence through drunkenness in the DIA, a project personally led by Secretary Hegseth, to engage in drinking parties with no clear intelligence goals. In his defense, Secretary Hegseth claimed that it was very difficult to remember the goals once the session started. 2. Hiring dwarves to spread false rumors about Peter Dinklage after the bad blood his advocacy generated in the dwarf community, and then using them in dwarf tossing competitions during intelligence through drunkenness competitions. 3. Having redacted his resume to hide that he had been dishonorably discharged from the Army due to drunkenness. C. Secretary Hegseth offered job as spokesman for Signal if he loses his job as Defense Secretary. Approached by reporters about a possible job at Signal in case he had to resign his position as Defense Secretary, Hegseth, showing great confidence, declared, "It worked for Kamala Harris as spokeswoman for Total Wine and More, so I can work for me too. Actually, I don't see any conflict of interest if I were called to do both jobs simultaneously. Yet, I don't lose hope that Jack Daniels will also make me a similar offer." If so, I swear to God that I can make the three of them simultaneously and show outstanding performance since motivation is key for performance. I learned that in the Army, declared Secretary Hegseth. As even the inclusion of drag queen scenes cut from the theatrical presentation failed to save Rachel Zegler's Snow White in Disney+. It had to be replaced by the 1937 animated movie and by Snow White inclusive with Terry Crews. Approached by reporters, CEO Bob Iger declared that, fortunately, we have the Haldol deal with Essential Pharma, which will help us break even with Rachel Zegler's Snow White, so the remake was not all we expected, but at least the shareholders will not be harmed. Secretary Rubio called back to Ukraine to look helpless in a photo op. Secretary Rubio returned to the Maldives right afterwards. In a brief appearance in Kyiv, Secretary Rubio, clearly emotional, declared that, "I almost feel I don't deserve my medals. The 6 of them that President Trump has granted me after my missions in Tonga and the Maldives and the ones he is sending me via UPS to the Maldives while Elon Musk restructures my department." When reporters asked him about the progress of the ceasefire in Ukraine, the state secretary was clear, "I don't know. President Trump didn't tell me." FDNC Chair Ken Martin makes a call to the nation to have their priorities clear and support Rachel Zegler's Snow White on Disney+. The Democratic leader urged all Americans not subscribed yet to Disney+ to do so. Frustrated with reporters who harassed him with questions about when Democrats were going to present an alternative to Trump's redefinition of government and the place of the United States in the world, Chair Martin responded, "Enough of focusing on boring stuff. Snow White is sinking in Disney+ rankings, and you keep asking me about democracy, the economy, Ukraine, China. Enough. Let's focus on the mission we have ahead of us, taking Snow White to the first spot. We failed when the movie was in theaters. There is no excuse now. And for those of you who still want to talk about boring issues, go to Leader Schumer, who has already presented clearly our play dead strategy for the American people to go back to us when they are more receptive to our 2024 message, Trump is not cool." And now, if you don't mind, I have an important meeting with Sweet Baby Inc. to discuss the Democratic policy about the situation of DEI in video games. FDR possesses famed medium Matt Fraser for 5 minutes to give a message, full of expletives to today's Democratic Party. "It's the first time I have felt such an overwhelming force," declared the medium before transmitting the message allegedly received from the president who gave us the New Deal. "Pansies. Fuck asterisk tilde dollar hash asterisk plus snowflakes. You are worse than asterisk tilde dollar hash asterisk plus. Can't win an election against Donald Trump. You only win the fuck asterisk tilde dollar hash asterisk plus elections you can't lose despite your best efforts. Even though I left you a fuck asterisk tilde dollar hash asterisk plus playbook on how to win. Asterisk tilde dollar hash asterisk plus. Asterisk tilde dollar hash asterisk plus. You deserve to be bitten to death by your own mothers, motherfuck asterisk tilde dollar hash asterisk plus. What have you done to my party?" That defeat Ken Martin worrying about Snow White when the nation is at the brink of a financial crisis, and that Schumer voting to give Trump powers over the budget like Orban's. Motherfuck asterisk tilde dollar hash asterisk plus s. Motherfuck asterisk tilde dollar hash asterisk plus s. Motherfuck asterisk tilde dollar hash asterisk plus s. Eat shit and die. As Doge defunds medical research at the NIH, new unconventional treatments are introduced by HHS. 1. Additional doses of vitamin A instead of vaccination. 2. Bringing back lead-to-water pipes to reduce levels of anxiety in children. This is based on the Stoic premise, what you can't understand won't hurt you. 3. Use of chamomile infusions against measles twice a day. 4. Ending the use of fluoride in the water supply to prevent low self-esteem. 5. inserting worms in the brain through the ear, based on JFK Jr.'s personal testimony about its beneficial effects. The new treatment will improve children's cognitive abilities, which will make Head Start unnecessary and prevent autism. Recommended starting with 7-year-olds. 6. Blending little birds and mice to feed your falcons. If the patients have other pets at home, these must be replaced by falcons. Recommended starting with 7-year-olds. 7. Prayer. Department of Education will cut Head Start as well as math and science courses from American schools' curricula. This has a triple purpose, according to Press Secretary. Press Secretary Leavitt announced the following new guidelines in education. A. Replace Head Start as well as math and science courses with religious education. This change will count on the collaboration of snake handler preachers, and its goal will be to prevent the frustration of parents of being unable to provide better lives to their offspring than the ones they received from their own parents. B. Teach practical skills to the new generation to prevent the frustration of realizing that from now on, we are going to lose the edge in science and live simpler lives as a result of the consequential fall in productivity that gave America the edge in the past. This goal will also try to solve the trauma and the levels of depression of our youngest generation every time they try to perform basic math operations. Why increasing their levels of anxiety among our youth? It's better to use the opportunity to teach them to cope with loss. Besides, religious education will give them hope that, after living vicariously the good life of elite workers on earth, one day they will be able to live it for real in heaven, added Education Secretary Linda McMahon. C. Solve the frustration inherited from the Biden administration about Answer A, which reveals that American kids are hopeless in math and science. Why keep trying when there is no way out? Better to accept that the times when we were good in math are behind us and focus on what matters: Jesus's tax cuts and the scapegoating immigrants to make them die for our sins. J. Shang-Chi Marvel sequel cancelled after it was revealed that Canadian actor Simu Liu didn't have points on his driver's license. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, on behalf of the squad, brought the nation's attention to this concerning finding. I have talked to Marvel, and they have assured me they were not aware of this violation of representation guidelines. All Asians have at least 3 points on their driver's licenses, and Mr. Liu has none. How is it possible that Marvel has let somebody who clearly doesn't represent the Asian community play a superhero character in their name? What I have been able to learn so far is that Marvel is going to make up for their mistake by replacing this actor with a morbidly obese black trans woman in a wheelchair. If so, I believe Marvel may be on a good path to recover the trust of the fans, declared the Congresswoman before updating us in her struggle against the joint forces of the oligarchy and the patriarchy. K. FBI investigating case of burglar who befriended victim's dogs, extending investigation for the relation it may have with the Commander case. After hurrying to arrest Wisconsin Judge Hannah Duggan, the FBI decided to extend the investigation of this case to the inquiries into the crimes committed by Commander, former President Biden's dog. The probe started after President Trump revoked the pardon granted to his dog by the former president for the bodies uncovered from shallow graves in the gardens of the White House. Former President Biden's attorney, who represents Commander, declared that the treatment given to the ex-president's pet was unfair, considering that similar graves have been uncovered in cases believed to be related to people missing after being invited to the White House by the president's sons, Don Jr. and Eric, in the period 2017 to 2020, and that, far from being investigated, Trump's sons have been promoted to co-chair the Federal Reserve.
This has been the news of this hour. Sponsored by Church of the Holy Redeemer's Power in the Spirit. Have you accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Savior? Did you vote for Trump in 2016 and then in 2020? This is the right church for you. If so, Church of the Holy Redeemer's Power in the Spirit is the only Christian church that can promise you in the Lord to have 72 virgins in heaven for only a donation of $50 a month. You will have access to those 72 virgins in heaven. For an additional $25, you will be allowed to replace 10 of them, and for $100, Heaven Premium, you will be allowed to choose them for yourself. Guaranteed, if you're not satisfied with those 72 virgins after you die, full refund of your money. We accept Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover.